Good evening, everyone. My name is Moises Esparza. I'm the exhibitions manager for the San Diego Latino Film Festival. Welcome to our 27th edition, being brought virtually via the Eventive platform. We were supposed to launch this edition of the festival back in March, but the coronavirus forced us to postpone it. But we were able to find a way to make sure all of our wonderful programming reached you to the safety of your own homes. We still have quite a few days to go left of our film festival, as well as many other films to screen. We will be here until the 27th, so please continue spreading the word about our film festival. The great thing about being virtual is that we have access to many filmmakers who are willing to participate in virtual Q&As and or post-screening discussions. And for this post-screening discussion of Birth Wars is no different. We have the director, Jarman, who is here to talk to us about the film. If you have any comments or questions, type them out via the Eventive platform or on our social media channels, and we'll make sure to bring them on screen so that Janet has a chance to answer questions or comment upon your thoughts. Let's welcome Janet. Hi, Janet, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Moises. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for everyone who's also here virtually.
Thank you so much for giving us permission to screen the film and for your willingness to do this Q&A. What time is it where you are? Is it too late?
No, it's 10 o'clock.
Okay, it's a little late, but someone was in Vienna and they woke up at 3 a.m. and I didn't know, so I felt so bad. I was like, oh my God, you woke up at 3 a.m. But I'm so thankful for all the filmmakers' flexibility to participate in these Q&As regardless of time zone. So thank you for your willingness to participate. Janet, Birth Wars is a documentary that explores the tension that exists between OBGYNs and midwives, and perhaps whose vision of childbirth should prevail in many ways. As a documentarian, what is your entry point into this conflict?
How did I get interested, or when did I start the project?
Oh, both. Yeah, you can answer that. But you can answer it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, my entry point into this project was actually much earlier than the movie. I started back in 2015, and I was on an assignment in Chiapas, Mexico, in southern Mexico, and I met a group of traditional midwives, and I was fascinated by them because they were leaders in their communities, very well respected. But what I noticed is that they were treating women as human beings and not as numbers or statistics, and they were treating them in a holistic way. And I also met some midwifery students from a very important school in Mexico, and they were starting to work in hospitals. They were professionally trained, and they were also seemed a bit frustrated. And I also talked to doctors in Chiapas at that time, and I realized that there was this huge conflict and that many people wanted change. And even if doctors wanted to give quality service, they couldn't sometimes because their hospitals were understaffed, had no medicines, various factors leading to really poor conditions to deliver quality service. And so I realized then that this story, this tension and their problems was a story that I really wanted to tell. And I wanted to know why midwives couldn't be incorporated and couldn't be recognized as the vital sort of people on the front line that they were being. And that's how it all started, really. But I think also, as I started exploring the topic more, I realized that this is certainly a global topic, and there's a huge movement to change the obstetric model and to give the choices back to women about how they want to give birth, if, where, with whom.
One of the moments that stands out, I guess, the most in the documentary is when the doctor is exiting the birth scene and he says something that I interpret as flippant along the lines of, "I'll see you at your next procedure," or something along those lines.
Your
And
next cesarean.
your next cesarean, which is, it felt callous to me and heartbreaking. But I think you as a documentarian do a great job at maybe pointing to the fact that the doctors themselves are experiencing some maybe systemic issues with being able to provide adequate care. But something that added to the doctor says doesn't seem to be perhaps a response to this. It seems to me maybe a disregard for the woman's experience. How did you approach striking a balance in the documentary between the two sides? Because as a viewer, it's very easy for me to align myself with the midwives who seem to be offering personal care versus a by the numbers approach that could be portrayed as, or that could be seen as flippant by the doctors. How did you find a balance?
Oh, that's a good question. And well, I think, I came to this with a photojournalist or a journalist background. And so throughout my career, I've always tried to tell balanced stories, complete stories. And when I received the grant to make the film, I started having visions of being in an overcrowded hospital and showing not just the midwifery model that has a lot of evidence that it can, physically and psychologically benefit women and babies and families. But I definitely wanted to show the doctors and the hospital side, the institutional side of the story. So it started from the very beginning where I was determined not to, to only show one side. So that was where the balance started. It took me a long time to get into the hospitals and a lot of trust building. And I just kept going back and going back. And I think eventually, as in all my long-term projects, people just realized, well, she's sincere. She really wants to tell our side, and she's not leaving. So maybe it was part of that, just the trust that I built over time. And, with the doctor, I wanted to he was very aware of me. Obviously, you're standing with a camera, and I was with him for a few days, and I wanted to tell, I didn't know what was going to happen. And I do think he's working in a very oversaturated hospital, and it becomes this routine. But that's where I also learned that a lot of, you asked me about how I balance that. And part of it was to definitely tell the hospital's side, or to try to find a gynecologist who would, talk to me and let me follow him. And, part of his frustration is that he has no supplies of medicines. So he told me that he prefers cesarean sometimes because it, less of a risk factor for complications, but that a lot of people would disagree that that's certainly not, what you should do. And, the next cesarean, that was a strong comment. And I think there's a lot of, as I've listened to this conversation around the world and gone to many and attended many seminars, I think there is a lot of doctor burnout. And I think the system, especially here in Mexico, the public system is broken in many ways. And they've in many ways lost the trust of the people. But that's not a reason to that's why there are a lot of women who are very frustrated and feel like their services lack dignity and respect. And many women are experiencing obstetric violence on many levels, not just in Mexico, but around the world. So I don't know if that answers.
we learn about some obstetric violence through the documentaries, particularly women who maybe went to the OBGYN to give birth, but they weren't sewn up correctly, leading to complications for further births. So you bring a definitely a clear portrayal of that. But in your documentary, that's full of perhaps this this suffering. It also deals with perhaps the beauty of life, giving birth. And you mentioned earlier earning trust. So we have footage in your documentary of live births and these intimate moments. So I guess personally, I'm less concerned maybe about access to a doctor's office and more concerned about how you approach the women on film who were giving birth. What was that process like in capturing their birth and earning their trust?
Um, it's not. I've always concentrated. I mean, I've done a lot of assignment work and other types of photojournalism. But when you're making, but I've always been committed to telling long-term projects whenever I can, and this is no different. And this is a super long-term project. And I'm really grateful that I could make a film on this topic because I think it allowed me the time I could take. Well, I had to take more time, and I could go much deeper, and I could really give the respect and the time to the people in the film, doctors and midwives. And I think it's like that any relationship in life. If you are sincere and you give respect and you give time, then you can achieve a lot in a relationship. And that's how I approached the midwives. And I spent a lot of time with them. And in the end, and they knew that I really wanted to tell their story. This was not my story, this was their story. And they also, it was just a matter of going back and spending the time. And, sometimes not filming, sometimes you're just having a meal together. Then they would later, by the end, they were inviting me to graduations, asking me to, participate in major or be in their families and in their family lives. So I think it's just building relationships like any relationship in life. Like I said, if you spend the time and then you gain the trust. And I'm just really grateful because I needed that trust to be able to tell an honest story and that really depicted some of their struggles and what they do to legitimize their work, but also depict their struggles and their challenges. So, and I've also, Chiapas is it's a region that can be very closed, and well, any region can be very close. You're asking to photograph a birth, so wherever it is. But I do have a lot of experience. I've worked about 8 years in Chiapas, back and forth doing various stories. So I think that helped a lot. And there's an NGO based in California and Mexico called Global Pediatric Alliance. And they helped me on the ground, and they introduced me to that one group of midwives in Sdlff. And so you go in with people who know people well, and then just doors open. But a lot of doors opened, and very quickly, faster than I thought they would. One time I thought I would be back in 2 weeks and back home. I was just going to do some, pre-production, talk to some people. But then what I asked for, the doors started opening, and I just stayed in the field for 8 weeks, calling home every now and then saying,
Oh, wow.
well, the doors are opening, so I have to stay. Yeah, this film is not, for me, it's a very organic process. It was nothing about how I work is normal or flows like it's supposed to. It's just this very organic process. And maybe that's the journalism background, and you just take roads and see where they go, and doors open, doors close, other ones open. But yeah, it's not like there's a set pre-production and then production. I wish it could be so simple, but it's not at all.
Well, something that's really beautiful about this documentary is how, I guess, when I see a lot of documentaries, I feel like subjects are being captured through like an anthropological lens, like they're being studied, and through that study, they're being othered, and it creates a pretty significant distance between viewer and subject. And your documentary is so precious in that it lacks that distancing in a way. So you mentioned it all happened very organically, but maybe it speaks to your talent as a journalist and as a documentarian that you're able to capture these so vividly and your subject so vividly, authentically. Um, what was I guess what I'm trying to think of, like, it's hard for me to think that there wasn't significant thought, I guess, behind how you're capturing your subjects. So maybe if you can extrapolate a little bit on that.
Yeah. Well, first, I really appreciate your comments. They really mean a lot to me because that is exactly how I want to work, and that is exactly how I want people to feel when they see my work. I'm determined not to perpetuate stereotypes, and I'm determined to photograph people as real human beings and really strike this relationship where we see what we have in common. And I think that happened very quickly. And and then people will open up, and then hopefully you can I mean, we're all human beings. It's frustrating how people categorize and put labels on people. But at the end of the day, we are all human beings, and we have a lot in common. And I think when people would realize that about me, that helps me get close or get closer. And but also really my determination not to. I feel very. I mean, there's a lot of conversation about that in today in representation, and yeah, it's a very big theme. But I've been thinking about it for 20 years. How can I go into these situations and really capture the essence of people as people?
I remember one of the midwives, I think maybe during a training, started alluding to more systemic hardships that midwives might experience, misogyny, racism, prejudices. How do you think your documentary addresses those things that obviously are really relevant onto your documentary on a micro level, but speak to maybe this worldwide experience that you alluded to earlier in the conversation?
Right, that was definitely something that I wanted to show and that I had to show because that is a huge problem in maternal health around the world. Women, um, I have felt judged going to the doctor. There is plenty of racism and discrimination, and that all can have very negative effects on maternal health, on health incomes for women or for anybody. There's got to be trust, and people have to be listened. They need to be respected and listened to. So in the beginning of the film, it's so complex. This topic is so complex. There are so many midwives, thousands, and they all have incredible stories, and so many people. It's just that was one of the biggest challenges. It's such a complex topic, and in the beginning, you think, well, I still have to, it's bigger than any journalism story I've ever done or any long-term project. It's a film, so at least you can have that much more time to say that much more. But even then, you still have an hour and a half or less. And so I remember in the beginning, I would just write down I wrote a list of topics that I knew were important to convey in this film. And then I had about 15 topics, 15 things. And that's a lot to convey. So I think my visual background, I would try to sort of, if I couldn't explore a topic in full, like the topic of obstetric violence could be its own film, the topic of traditional midwives, there are different types of midwives. But I just had that in mind, and visually, I would try to illustrate things visually. Little types, I definitely wanted to talk about the discrimination and the racism in the pueblos originarios because it's there, I've seen it. And, the fact that there's not a translate, that one scene where there's, he has to go find a translator. Usually there isn't a translator. And the clothes of the woman are on the floor. And the way the way that doctor talks to the young man, like, parate, get up, stand up. So I feel like
Yeah.
little things. I could just show little subtle things, and a lot of them were in the visuals. So if I couldn't explore a whole topic of the 15 that I wanted to say, because you have to pick one theme or a focus, I would try to show them visually. And just like the animals, I'm always, there's a subtext of that. And so I think the visuals, I tried to carry a lot of the messages that I couldn't explore completely, if that makes sense.
Beyond these themes that you mentioned, there's also a strong sense of solidarity amongst women, amongst the midwives, but also when you focus on these individuals who are going to give birth or are pregnant, we get to see their home life to some extent, and through it all, I think we get a sense of sisterhood, which I think cuts across really, really, really strongly. Tell me a little bit about the editing process of the documentary in terms of the intent of these scenes and how you hope that they would enhance, I guess, maybe a more overall portrait of what you were trying to convey.
Well, I think I'll have to credit the editor, Philippe Lane, for that also.
Oh, sorry.
And, no, he's. But we worked very closely on all of these scenes and like lived them over and over. And I'm especially Philippe, because I tend to produce too much material or too many scenes, because I get very enthusiastic in the field in different. So yeah, that's an interesting question. The sisterhood was something that, for some strange, for some reason, here I am, a woman. I've been in visual communication and storytelling for my whole career, but I had never done a story that touched on sisterhood quite like this one, and it completely moved me. I mean, today it moved I knew there's, we talk about the power of women, but to watch the power of women helping other women in this intimate situation, it was just incredible and made a huge impact on me and will for the rest of my life. So that was interesting. So sure, I wanted to show that, but I also wanted to show, aspects of people in their daily life. And I mean, the film had to breathe. The births are so intense, and every birth is so different. And I've photographed a lot of births, and I'm also doing a still photography book now, and I'm photographing more births, and they're just all so fascinating and different. And so you have to kind of create some rhythm and some breathing room so that people can get close and get to know the person as, as just a regular person, not, in their daily life, and not during this extreme scene of birth. Is that sort of what you mean?
Yeah, I think I'm going to bring it's like an observation where it might be like, I don't know if generational kindness is like an actual thing, but this theme of there's a scene of a mother who's carrying like a really heavy bag, and her daughter like really wants to take it, and to help her, and her mom's like, no, it's too heavy, but like you see the daughter just take the bag with pride to help. So I love this through line of like generational kindness, generational sisterhood. And this is just an observation. It's not really a question. It's just something that I observed in the documentary that I really admired. Tell me a little bit about the film is very woman heavy. Tell me, and I feel like whenever there's a man on screen, it reads to me as an obstruction. Personally, it seems I feel like I care less about their experience in the documentary than I do the women, obviously. So how did you, I guess maybe, was there any thought behind that, or am I just projecting my own sensibilities onto your film?
That is really interesting. I hadn't thought of that. And in fact, I think including men was intentional, because I want this to be seen as not just a women's issue,
Yeah.
but birth and how women are treated during birth has a lot to do with the future of how the relationship with the child, the relationship with the whole family. And I think when I was filming early on, and I saw this young man, 17 years old, and he had gone to the general hospital in Guerrero, in Tlapa. It's a scene that didn't come in the movie, but well, a similar one came later. But just to see this young man just crying so hard, he went to the midwife section of the hospital. It's one of the few places where I saw where a woman could walk in, and if she was considered low risk, she could choose, do you want to have an institutional birth or a partera birth, because they had a section. And she chose partera, and he never dreamed that he could be with his wife during a birth. And he just cried and cried. I mean, he cried just like the man in the midwifery center later. And I think when I filmed those men crying, it really touched me, because I realized that this is not just a women's issue, but it's also a men's issue. I mean, it's a universal issue of how to improve the experience of childbirth. It has become in so many ways so mechanized and so medicalized. And if given the chance and the risk is low enough, which 85% of the time, according to the WHO, a woman should be able to go through with a natural childbirth. And when that process is allowed to happen, it is just fascinating to watch, not just how the woman feels and her confidence and her empowerment and her physical comfort, psychological comfort, but the empowerment, but also, how that can help the baby, and how it helps probably the man, the partner. So I did feel like those scenes were important to include. I wanted to include those. And since filming, I've done a lot. I've photographed a lot of, I've continued on this topic, and I'm still sort of really fascinated by a lot of these. I see a lot of younger Mexican couples where the woman wants the husband to experience the birth with her, and he does too. And then they're able to do that and have the process that they want. And I watch how the contrast and the difference that it makes in their lives. And I can't help thinking that if it makes a difference in their lives, then it could make a difference in the baby's life, their family's life, the community, society. It's just not interrupting a process and giving a woman the choice to do what she wants with her body is pretty powerful.
No, absolutely.
So an instruction. Yeah, I hope they didn't interrupt too much the sisterhood.
No,
theme
I guess I might be like reading too specifically into one thing, but I remember a nurse explaining something to one of the fathers, and I think it might have been about her care, and he looked so like lost, and I guess maybe I felt bad for him, and maybe I felt like this shouldn't be your choice or your decision making. This should be about your wife. But maybe that's just a particular scene that maybe informed too much of my viewing experience, perhaps. Your documentary is evocative of many realities that women face in the world, I guess, as a maybe artistic thesis or statement. What is it that you hope to convey as a filmmaker about through this documentary about yourself?
About myself?
Yeah, as a filmmaker. Yeah.
I think this film gave me. I've always been really drawn to throw myself into situations, hoping that I can capture the essence of that situation. Take viewers deep into a situation or a place, into the trenches of, in this case, a healthcare debate. I want them to feel like they can get as close as I did, or so much closer to the scene, to the point that they will understand it on a different level, or be motivated to learn more. But really, I just think that I want people to look at this and say, you know, some documentaries maybe want to agitate, or I want to show and not tell, and I want to reveal and humanize. So I want people to go away feeling like they really felt something, and that they connected with the characters, and that they leave feeling quite emotional about the topic, perhaps. And
Um,
also, I hope that people can, you know, the main point is to show um, that there's another way. There's another way to go about childbirth, and so many, and it's not just childbirth. It's, in this movie, it's childbirth, but we've spent so much time interrupting natural processes, and look where we are today. And childbirth is something that there are a lot of people trying to change this experience, and I think that it is possible, and that change can happen where life starts, either, you know, at birth.
yeah. Thank you, Janet. We're approaching the kind of end of our allotted time here. So if we can maybe take a step back and maybe, not a step back, but a step out of this documentary, but maybe describe um, how what's going on in the world right now with the pandemic has affected um, you creatively. Has this been a moment of great creative output, or has it been an impediment? Tell us a little bit about what you're working on and how maybe this time has affected it.
Yeah, that's a great question, because my back in March 1st, or I photographed Rafaela, the protagonist midwife in the movie. She gave birth in her home with a midwife, and it was such a powerful experience, and it was so intimate.
Wow.
And as
Yeah.
I was photographing her birth, and between contractions, I would walk by her television and see the news. Okay, Mexico, first coronavirus case confirmed. I thought, my heart was dropping, thinking, how will I, and for a month afterwards, how will I ever photograph in the intimate way that is my style, that is what I love, that is the only way I know how to tell stories, and stories have to be told. I just thought, how can I change? How will I ever be able to do this again? So eventually I figured this story has to be told, women giving birth during, you know, a pandemic. I cannot just not tell this story. So I just, like all of my colleagues, you just immerse yourself and figure out, well, how can I work safely so that it's safe for other people? My biggest fear was that at first, you know. I think, well, how can we enter people's lives as photographers and storytellers? You know, how is that possible? Is that even fair? And then you see a lot of stories coming out, and you realize the stories need to be told. And so I have to, you know, just did a lot of research and figured out where to get protective equipment. And I've been driving around Mexico instead of flying. And I have a car full of personal protective equipment, PPE, and I've got it all for every situation, and I've had to use it all. And yeah, sometimes it's a totally different way of working, but you have to get through you have to get through it. And you watch doctors and you watch the midwives, and they're on the front lines. And so I need to tell this story. So I've continued telling this story in between other smaller projects, and I think I've been able to. Yeah, I don't know another way to photograph. You know, there was all this talk. Well, you know, I thought, am I just going to take portraits now of of people, you know, 20 feet away? And no, it doesn't. It didn't have to be like that. I think people are. There's a lot. We're much more used to this now. After the first huge scare, few months, we're much more used to this now, and it can be done. But it is definitely has added another layer of stress to being in the field. I will not lie about that.
Well, Janet, thank you so much for your time today, for taking a moment out of your evening to chat with me. I thought someone left a comment, but it's just one word. I'll wait a second to see if maybe they finish their thought.
Okay.
You know, thank you for sharing this documentary. with
Thank
us and for
you.
letting us screen in it, regardless of its method, which is virtual right now. Um, it means the world that a documentary like this was able to play at our own film festival, because I don't think that we screened anything like it, or I haven't seen anything really like it play at our fest. Something like that captures such a personal experience, birth in such a dignified way, and is framed against maybe a dialogue or rhetoric surrounding women's choices and access to the type of care that they want to access. So thank you so much, Janet, for your time. Did you have any parting words or anything to share with us? I guess you can share where the documentary is playing next, or if it'll be released theatrically eventually, or any future plans.
We're still in festivals. The next one I think will be in Ecuador. We're in the middle of all that whole process right now with an agent, and I hope that it can be widely viewed in the US. I want to thank you all. I was so excited to hear this news when you selected the film. I mean, and I was really excited to go there, and I know we can't, but congratulations on reinventing your film festival so that it could reach a lot of people. These issues are very similar in the US as what you've seen in Mexico, the whole conflict. And I'm excited that in Mexico we will start to have an impact campaign. They did ask to play Birth Wars in the National Congress back in December to sensitize legislators who were starting an initiative to legalize birth centers another way, and to sort of help incorporate midwives in a much bigger way. So I think that's impact, and I think a lot of people will be able to see it in Mexico, universities and medical schools, and hopefully secretaries of salud. And so I think within Mexico, it's going to start to really hopefully make some more impact this fall. Continue with festivals, and I mean, I think that there's a large audience for this topic, and people are very interested in this topic, more than I ever imagined. And it's just really, it's global, but I think that the general public, what I've learned is the general public also needs to see that there's another way. And so then you'll start to, get more momentum, and that's how change eventually happens. So I hope this film can contribute to creating more momentum.
Wow. Thank you so much, Janet, for all your words.
Thank you.
Thank you for anyone tuning in and for watching the film. Janet, thank you. Have a great evening. I hope to be able to screen one of your films on the big screen one day and have an in-person Q&A. So I hope that happens.
That would be amazing. And thank you for your super thoughtful questions. They were just that you really thought about.
Yeah, some of them were projections. So I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But thank you for your documentary. It touched me very immensely.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you also. Okay.
Okay. Have a good day. Talk to you soon.
Good night.
Bye-bye.